On behalf of the Secretary of the Navy, welcome to today's Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day ceremony, honoring African American contributions as part of the greatest generation. Providing our music this morning is the Pacific Fleet Band, playing under the direction of Lieutenant J.G. Michael Shea, United States Navy. Please join me in recognizing them for their outstanding pre-ceremony concert. In just a moment, the Secretary of the Navy, Thomas Modly, the Commander, United States Pacific Fleet, Admiral Chris Aquilino, will arrive. In an effort to allow all our guests the opportunity to view the entire ceremony, I will provide direction when appropriate to stand or remain seated. To preserve the dignity of this ceremony, we ask that you silence all cellular phones and other wireless devices at this time. We welcome and are honored to have many distinguished guests with us today, serving in both civilian and military positions. Please allow me to recognize several of our guests at this time. I request that you hold your applause until all have been introduced. Military representatives from the Republic of Korea, New Zealand. Our Pacific Command Component Commanders. State senators and representatives of Hawaii, active duty and retired flag officers and members of our senior executive service. And now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our platform party. Now, we are very, very fortunate to be joined this morning by the Honorable Eddie Bernice Johnson, Representative for Texas 30th District. Representative Johnson chairs the House Space, Science, and Technology Committee and is a senior member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. She is a member of the Army Caucus and a member and former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. The Honorable Bill Flores of Texas, 17th District. Representative Flores serves on the House Budget Committee and the House and Energy and Commerce Committee. He is a member of the Army and Joint Strike Fighter Caucuses and the Congressional Hispanic Conference. The Honorable Ed Case, United States Representative from the state of Hawaii. U.S. Representative Ed Case proudly represents Hawaii's 1st Congressional District, Oahu from Makapu'u through central Honolulu and leeward to Mililani, Waipahu, Ewa, Kapolei, and Ko'olina. Former Acting Secretary of the Navy, the Honorable B.J. Penn. Rear Admiral Julius Caesar, United States Navy, retired. Rear Admiral Sinclair Harris, United States Navy, retired. Ms. Henrietta Bledsoe Miller of Fort Worth, Texas. Ms. Flosetta Miller and Ms. Brenda Haven of Midland, Texas. Pacific Fleet, Fleet Master Chief, James Honey. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the parading of the national colors, the playing of the national anthem, and the Hawaii State Song, and honors to Secretary Modly. This will be followed by a Hawaii blessing and the invocation. Pacific Fleet arriving. Navy arriving. Ready, two. Bosun, retire the side boys. Parade the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, the Pacific Fleet Band will now play our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner
Ready, two. Ladies and gentlemen, the Hawaii State Song, Hawaii I Pono'i.
Hawaii pono'i, nanai komo'i, kalani ali'i ke ali'i. Makuhalani e Kamehameha e Nakawai pale Meka ihe. Makuhalani e Kamehameha e Nakawai pale Meka ihe.
Retire the colors. And salute. Ready, two. Kahu Cordell Kakoa will now deliver a Hawaiian blessing.
Aloha kakahi kakako, aloha.
Aloha.
I'd like to read something from the Queen Liliuokalani, as we begin this wonderful service today. She reminded us, you must remember, never cease to act because you fear you may fail. The way to lose any earthly kingdom is to be inflexible, intolerant, and prejudicial. Another way is to be too flexible, tolerant of too many wrongs, and without judgment at all. It is a razor's edge. It is the width of a blade of a peely grass. To gain the kingdom of heaven is to hear what is not said, to see what cannot be seen, and to know the unknowable. That is aloha. All things in this world are two. In heaven, there is but one. I'm going to do an oli to begin our ceremony today. O nauna I ka halame ka lehua, e hale lehua, no ia na ka no e. O ka uno ia, e a no I nei, e li a nei no hoi. O ka hiki mai, a hiki mai no oi, o kou. A hiki pume no ke aloha, aloha e, aloha e, aloha e. E ole ole mai kalani, e hau ole hoi ka honua, e halulu mai ka moana, e ma kona mea e piha ai. Aloha e, aloha e, aloha e. Mahalo ke akua me ke aloha po mehana, e malama ho o mai kaku he malumau. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Chaplain Pittman will now offer the invocation.
Friends, let's pray together. Our God and our King, Lord, we thank you because today is a day that you have made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. Lord, we have gathered together today on this day where we celebrate the contributions to our society of Martin Luther King Jr. And Lord, it is so amazing that today we will name a ship, Lord, a carrier. Lord, we know that in numerous ways the military was a leading institution in our struggle for civil rights, and we thank you for our leaders, Captain Jeff Bernard, Admiral Chadwick, and the Secretary of the world's greatest Navy to make this day possible. Lord, as we name this ship, we do not think of ourselves, but we think of the over 100,000 sailors who will serve on her during her lifetime. Lord, some as young as 18. Many of them, Lord, we know have not been born yet. So as we commence with the ceremony, we ask that your Spirit be with us and to guide our hearts and direct our actions. And it is your most holy name that we pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and remain seated throughout the remainder of the ceremony. Military guests may uncover. At this time, I would like to introduce the Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam Gospel Choir, who will today be performing Lift Every Voice and Sing and one other selection.
One for everybody, or? Here we go. I can take the words.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the glistening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
The spirit of the a day that holds with
Full of the faith that the present has brought us. Facing the begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Weary years us thus far on the way. Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Bless our feet, stray on the places, our God, where we met thee. Bless our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath the head, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Rock of ages, help for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Let the waters and the blood from the wounded side which falls be a sin. The double cure, straight from wrath, and make me pure. Could my tears forever flow? Could my zeal no longer know? These for sins could not atone. Thou must save, and thou alone. In my hands, no price I bring, simply to thy cross I cling. Rock of ages, but for me, me hide myself in thee. From thy wounded side which flows, be a sin, a double cure, set for wrath. While I draw this fleeting breath, when my eyes shall close in death, when I rise to worlds unknown and behold thee on thy throne, rock of ages, clip for me, let me hide myself in thee. Oh, rock of ages, but for me, let me hide myself in thee. Let the waters and the blood from down dead shall wish for. Be a sin, the double cure, sing for us. Rock of ages, rock of ages, rock
Thank you, Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam Gospel Choir, for those wonderful renditions. It is now our honor to introduce the Honorable B.J. Penn, former Acting Secretary of the Navy and Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Installations and Environment.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Test. Secretary Mudley, Admiral, distinguished guests, members. I've been blessed to do a lot of things in my life. But it's truly a great honor to stand here on Keynote Pier today to welcome you to the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day. This is a hallowed site and a memorial to the sailors and Marines that demonstrated courage, commitment, and competence during the surprise attack on 7 December 1941. The sacrifices made here were not in vain. Our valiant forces, heroes, set the standard for performance that led us to victory during World War II. Heroes ruled the day then and continue to rule today. We are in debt to our armed service personnel and their families. Who was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King? This could easily take the rest of the day. Briefly, he was born in 1929, died in 1968, was a Baptist minister who changed the social and political fabric of America during the 20th century. In his own words, he was a drum major for justice, a drum major for peace, and a drum major for righteousness. He was a transformative as a leader for human rights. He was influenced by the nonviolent advocacy of Mahatma Gandhi. He was responsive to the biblical injunctive of Micah 6:8 that commands us to pursue justice, embrace mercy, and to walk humbly. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a conscience of America during the latter part of the 20th century. It was Dr. King that said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." I believe that Dr. King would recognize and applaud the U.S. Navy leadership of Admiral Elmo Zumwalt, who truly changed the Navy, and we continue to make progress under our leadership. A few miles from here, I began my service as a naval aviator at Naval Air Station Barbers Point. I won't give you the date, but I was told that you weren't even born. It's been a while. We lived in Radford Terrace, which at the time was behind Coco's Restaurant, had 3 children, all born at Tripler Army Hospital. And at that time, there were only 225 African-American officers in the Navy. The senior officer was Commander Dave Parham, Chaplain Corps. Here in Hawaii, we had Lieutenant Commander Wesley Brown, who was the first African-American to graduate from the Naval Academy. Then Lieutenant Commander Samuel L. Gravely, who was the commanding officer of DE 324, the USS Falcon, based at Pearl Harbor. He later achieved the rank of Vice Admiral, and on 20 November 2010, DDG 107 was commissioned as the USS Samuel L. Gravely. Captain Frank Peterson, Marine Corps, was stationed in VFF 232 at Kaneohe Bay, flying F-8 Crusaders. He went on to fly F-4s in Vietnam, shot down, repatriated. We got him back. We picked him up the same day. On 8 October 2018, DDG 121 was christened as the USS Frank E. Peterson, Jr. Since 1968, 56 African-American naval officers have achieved flank rank, along with 25 African-American Marine Corps officers. America is stronger when we underscore our meritocracy with integrity. The United States military set the standard. We owe a debt to all who have served, particularly in harm's way, and who have otherwise kept our honor clean. The bond between our warriors and their families and the leadership of our intrepid leaders will always generate sustainable performance that will let the symbol of freedom, the American flag, wave from our ships, naval stations, air stations, embassies, state houses, and cities throughout our grateful nation. I have been privileged to serve this great nation, and after visits to dozens of nations, each time I return home, I feel like kissing the ground. This land is our land. Heroes will always rule the day.
Please welcome the Honorable Eddie Bernice Johnson, United States Representative for the state of Texas.
Aloha.
Aloha.
I hope I did that right. To Secretary Thomas Motley, all of the other officers, my colleagues, family of Doris Miller, and all of you who've assembled here today, I am so pleased to be here. I'm so grateful to the Secretary for the message he delivered to me last week. For you see, when I was just starting to school, Dory Miller was here. And I followed my father all over the neighborhood to collect money to give something to Dory Miller when he came home. So you know I'm old, but you also know that all of my life I have heard of how great Doris Miller was, and I believed every word. And I have worked from the time I went to Congress, and I'm in my 28th year, to try to get the Medal of Honor for Dory Miller. My journey is not quite over, but I'm so grateful. This is an emotional moment for me. When you grow up as a kid and told by your favorite father that Dory Miller helped to save the United States by shooting down Japanese invasion planes, true or not, you never forget it. I love America. We're indebted to our armed forces for never having to fight a war on our shores. When I was first elected to office, I again thought of Dory Miller as my childhood hero. In 1972, when I was elected to the Texas House of Representatives, one of the first things that I did when I returned to Waco, Texas, my hometown, was look up Mrs. Miller, Dory Miller's mother, to let her know that it was the spirit of Dory Miller that made me appreciate being American more than anything else. Because in the days of real segregation, a black man from my hometown had stepped up to help save America. I was proud. And it's notable today that we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, because Dr. King was also a hero of mine and many, many others. But he said the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. He also said, the time is always right to do right. And so, I am so overcome with emotion today and thankfulness to see all of these sailors. My father was inducted that same year right after the Pearl Harbor, and he and his brother went to the Navy, and they survived. And so that started my dedication to our armed forces. And everybody in Waco knows, although I don't represent Waco, they know their hometown girl never forgot that it was Dory Miller's spirit that gave me the oof to move forward, to help us continue our thrust and our lust for a great democracy in the country that we live. All of us know that a democracy is what you make it. It is lifelong, it is moving, it is never final. But Dory Miller started the civil rights movement and perhaps even gave Martin Luther King Jr. the spirit to lead us the era of which he did. So it's important for me today to say to you, as a now an old woman, how much I appreciate the fact that I am an American, and how much I appreciate the military for making it the America it is today, where we can walk safely and we can feel free to continue to build on our democracy. This has done so much to recognize that no matter the color of your skin, you can achieve. No matter the color of your skin, although you might not get the Medal of Honor, it could be just delayed and not denied. So thank you, thank you, thank you today for this ceremony and for this recognition of my childhood hero that saved America. Thank you.
Now please welcome the Honorable Bill Flores, United States Representative for the state of Texas.
Let me start by saying howdy, which is Texas for aloha. You Texans know that. Secretary Moodley and Admiral Aquino, it's great to be here. Secretary Brown, thank you for, former Secretary Penn, General Brown, it's great to be with you for this important recognition to honor African-American contributions to the greatest generation during World War II and beyond. I also want to recognize Flozetta, Henrietta, and Brenda, so the nieces of Dory Miller, for being here today. And I want to recognize my friend and colleague, Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, for being with us today. As you heard, she's a Waco hometown girl, and I am honored to represent Waco. It's an honor to be part of this event to name the United States Navy's newest aircraft carrier, CVN-81, in honor of Petty Officer Doris Miller. Today we recognize Petty Officer Miller, not just for his service to the Navy, but specifically for his bravery and courage during the attacks on Pearl Harbor on 7 December 1941. Having been the first African American to be awarded the Navy Cross, Petty Officer Miller will now be the first enlisted sailor to have an aircraft carrier named in his honor. It's an honor to pay tribute to one of America's heroes from the greatest generation, a man who exemplifies the hearts of our sailors and the spirit of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who we also recognize today. As you heard Eddie Bernice say, Dr. King once said, quote, "The time is always right to do something right," unquote. That is what Petty Officer Miller did. His story of bravery is a testament to his courage and commitment to serve both his fellow sailors and his country. During the attack on Pearl Harbor and while under heavy enemy fire, Petty Officer Miller's bravery rose above and beyond the call of duty by leaving the laundry and aiding the mortally wounded captain of the ship and then manning a .50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun. He returned fire upon the enemy until he was out of ammunition and is believed to shot down one or more enemy planes. I think Eddie Bernice has confirmed that he had several kills. After the signal to abandon ship, and in the final moments before the USS West Virginia sank, Petty Officer Miller carried many of his wounded shipmates to safety and saved the lives of many of his fellow sailors. In May of 1942, in recognition of his heroism at Pearl Harbor, then Secretary of the Navy Frank Cox and Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz awarded Petty Officer Miller the Navy Cross, the second highest military decoration for valor. Admiral Nimitz commented that his bravery, quote, "marks the first time in this conflict that such a high tribute has been made in the Pacific Fleet to a member of his race, and I'm sure that the future will see others similarly honored for his brave acts," unquote. Petty Officer Miller's story has grown since then into one of the most iconic tales of bravery told of World War II, with his actions being memorialized on the big screen by actor Cuba Gooding Jr. in the 2001 movie Pearl Harbor. Again, I am proud to say that Petty Officer Miller is from Waco, Texas, where he is a hometown hero and an inspiration to all of our community. Today's significant recognition of this African-American hero serves as an inspiration to all of our Navy's enlisted military men and women who come from a diversity of backgrounds and origins to serve in our armed forces. The naming of CVN-81 is a capstone addition to the prior recognitions of our local Waco hero. This action builds upon one of my most humbling activities during my time in Congress, which was to memorialize Dory Miller's legacy in his hometown by leading a group of our Texas congressional colleagues to rename the Waco VA Medical Center as the Doris Miller Department of Veteran Affairs Medical Center. Today, along with our Central Texas constituents, I join all Americans to celebrate and promote Petty Officer Doris Miller's legacy of service and sacrifice as a national hero, motivating current and future generations of American sailors as they selflessly serve to defend our liberty and freedom. So thank you. God bless the lives and legacies of Dr. Martin Luther King and Doris Miller. God bless our sailors, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Please welcome Admiral Chris Aquilino, Commander, United States Pacific Fleet.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Before I have the distinct honor to introduce our guest speaker, I'd like to say a couple of things. First, from the Hawaii community, I'd like to pass our deepest condolences to the family and friends of the innocent residents that were killed in yesterday's events. In particular, 2 Honolulu police officers gave their life in the defense of others. Additionally, in just recent months, we lost a couple of fallen civilian warriors from the shipyard. So if you would, please indulge me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Before I get to introduce our guest speaker, though, there are numerous individuals that deserve recognition today. I know Governor Ige was hoping to be here, and he wouldn't, but I'd like to thank him personally for all the things he does here in Hawaii for the military. Congressman Case, it's good to see you, sir. Thank you also. Representative Bernice Johnson, thank you, ma'am, for being here. Congressman Flores, also. Some famous friends that have returned for this wonderful event. Secretary Penn, sir, it's great to see you again. General Brown, my battle buddy with General Craparata, thank you both for attending today. All the distinguished members of the Flag and General Wardroom, thanks. Specifically, Jules, thank you for being here. Sink, I know you're out in the crowd somewhere. Thanks, my brother. It's good to see you, too. All of the representatives from the Hawaii State Legislature, thank you very much for taking care of us each and every day. It's wonderful to see you. Lastly, the distinguished members of the Consular Corps, it's good to see you, my friends, and thank you for honoring us with your presence today. It's great to spend time with you. Lastly, but certainly not least, to the Miller family. Thank you all for being here today and spending time with us. It's been my pleasure and honor to meet you and spend some time with you, and I hope to continue that friendship in the future. Thank you very, very much. Okay, many of you have been to the Kilo Pier, but it never stops holding a very special spot in our hearts. Behind us, bookends, World War II. Both the start and the finish. Arizona and Missouri, they represent the tragic start and victorious end. The determination and sacrifice of our greatest generation secured a free and open Indo-Pacific for these last 75 years. Those of us who now come behind them can never repay them for their costs. We can, though, and should remember their example. They serve as the standard, both in wartime and peace. And we strive to be worthy. With that is in our mind that I'm particularly humbled to participate in this historic event today. And I do have the distinct honor of introducing the guest speaker. His take no prisoners, forward-leaning leadership is keenly focused on delivering and sustaining lethal, combat-ready forces necessary to keep the peace. And in absence of that peace, that same force will be able to fight and win when challenged. Just days ago, in his recent leadership guidance to the Navy, he reminded us that the 355-ship Navy is the law of the land. And he's redoubled our nation's efforts to reach that goal within 10 years. The combination of those lethal ships, our uniformed sailors, our civilian warriors, will help ensure the free and open Indo-Pacific. That is so all nations with our values of freedom, rules-based order, and human rights can prosper. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming the Secretary of the Navy, Honorable Thomas Modly. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Admiral. Aloha, everybody. Aloha. Before I start, I just want to say some things about my staff. When we first started talking about this idea, they embraced it more than I could have ever expected or wanted, and they took it on as if Doris Miller was their own uncle or father. And there were literally hundreds of people that came together to make this day possible, and so I just would like to publicly recognize them and thank them for their dedication, for their commitment to making this day as special as possible for everybody here, but everyone across this country. So thank you. Special greetings again to all our distinguished guests here, Representative Case, Representatives Eddie Bernice Johnson and Bill Flores, all of our senior officers who are here today, our allies and partners, and we have several of them represented from the UK, Australia, Republic of Korea, New Zealand, Japan, France, Singapore, and Taiwan. Fleet Master Chief James Honey, Professor Thomas Couture, and special thanks especially to the entire Miller family, including Doris Miller's nieces, who you've been introduced to a couple times today already, Henrietta, Flozetta, and Brenda. It's an honor to join you all here on the birthday of one of our nation's and the world's greatest spiritual, intellectual, and moral leaders. But before I begin, please allow me a moment to recognize the families of those shipyard workers who lost their lives in the very recent horrible tragedy here at Pearl Harbor. To the families of Vince Capoy Jr., Roldan Augustin, I want you all to know that our entire Navy family is grieving with you. To Roger Nakamaini, a survivor of the shooting, we are also with you as you recover from your physical injuries and the non-physical injuries and emotional trauma that you had to experience that day. We all understand that service to our nation, particularly here in this incredibly strategic and beautiful location, has at certain times in our own history exacted a price that seems disproportionate and unjust. We hear this, and we trust that you understand that we are committed to understanding the truth behind this tragedy, and that we will pursue that truth with the primary commitment to bring you a complete and transparent understanding of what happened and why. We are with you. We want this understanding as much as you do. We want it so that we can do everything we can to ensure that no other families in our broad naval community have to feel the pain that you're all still feeling today. But most importantly, so that you can heal and have a sense of peace about the tragic sacrifice of your loved ones. You have my personal commitment that we will pursue and communicate the truth, and we will do whatever we can to help you heal as a family. Ultimately, we all understand that service to our nation extends beyond those we see in uniform. We have an obligation to protect all those who enter our gates every day to make our Navy stronger. We take that obligation seriously, and we are heartbroken over what has happened here and in Pensacola and in Little Creek, Virginia over the last several weeks. We grieve with you, and we will find answers for you. Dr. Martin Luther King understood what it meant to sacrifice oneself for a greater cause. He eloquently observed, quote, Everybody can be great because anyone can serve. And no one understands the importance and true meaning of the word service more than those who have volunteered to serve and support the United States Navy and Marine Corps. I love that. These are the people we ask daily and directly to face tyrannical forces around the world that threaten stability and peace. These are the people who put the needs of others, of their nation, above themselves. They see personal sacrifice in support of liberty and human dignity as their duty. But we see it as a precious virtue, unmatched in the history of the human experience. Throughout the history of our nation, the finest of every generation has stepped forward to serve the cause of freedom around the world. But today, especially today, as we celebrate the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., we recognize that for too many of these warriors, the liberty they defended overseas was denied to them and their families here at home simply because of the color of their skin. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, Dr. King wrote, quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." 75 years ago, a war against injustice started right here. And on the days that followed, our nation bound together to secure victory against an existential threat to ourselves, but also to secure opportunities for broader liberty and justice for the entire world. It was a moment of national unity that we should all treasure and hold it as a standard for what it means to be an American. No matter where we come from or how we look. But even as we are unified in the pursuit of justice and peace for the world, we are not perfect in our own pursuits of these values here at home. That contradiction is an undeniable part of our history, one that cannot be glossed over or forgotten. It's real. And when we study it and open our eyes to it, it hurts. It hurts our perceptions of ourselves, of our nation, and of our history. But we should not despair. We should continue to look. Nor should we use those failings as the basis for eroding the value of the ideals we have pursued. Because the story of our nation is not about that. It's about much, much more than our imperfections. It's much more about how, when we've fallen short, extraordinary Americans persevered with honor, dignity, and courage to remind us of our founding principles and to what values we all truly aspire. And they have led us forward out of those weaknesses towards something we all know that is right and just and good. And on this day, and every day, we must remember all those who fought and died for this aspiration, an aspiration that treasured life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not only for themselves, but for all the generations that would follow. They represent everything that is good about our nation. They must stand at the center of our common memory and our understanding about the unique place that we hold in the history of civilization. During the Civil War, Frederick Douglass urged Abraham Lincoln to open the doors of service to African Americans. He said, quote, "Once let the black man get upon his person the brass letters U.S., let him get an eagle on his button and a musket on his shoulder and bullets in his pocket, and then there will be no power on earth that can deny him that he has earned the right to citizenship." And the African Americans who answered this call during the Civil War served with distinction and honor, both ashore and afloat. In fact, by the end of the Civil War, the overall enlisted force of the Union Navy was 20% African American, with African American sailors on every ship, and the enlisted ranks were largely an integrated force. But in the years that followed, African Americans were denied an equal opportunity to serve. And by World War I, that 20% number had dwindled to 3% of the Navy being African American. and they served under entirely segregated conditions. On December 7th, 1941, there were African Americans serving here in this place, right behind me on Battleship Row. But all of them were below decks, restricted to the segregated messman's branch as personal servants to white officers. One of those dedicated sailors was Messman Dory Miller of Waco, Texas. Messman Miller had just finished serving breakfast on board the battleship West Virginia when torpedoes began to fall right where near we stand today. When an explosion prevented him from reaching his battle station as an ammunition passer, Miller was ordered to the ship's damaged and blazing bridge. There, he helped carry the ship's captain to greater safety. Then, he did what we all have heard. He took charge of a Browning .50 caliber machine gun, a gun that he had not been trained to use, simply because of the color of his skin. On the burning and heavily listing starboard deck, he loaded the weapon and shot back at the attacking airplanes until his ammunition ran out. Along several officers and enlisted men, Miller fought fires on the bridge, protecting the captain until he was pronounced dead. Then he traversed hand over hand to the ship's deck, where he saved the lives of many sailors by pulling them from the burning water. When the order came to abandon ship, he stayed behind to help, and he helped. Messman Miller was one of the last 3 sailors to leave the West Virginia that fateful morning. For his actions, Doris Miller was awarded the Navy Cross, the first African American to be so decorated. And it is now my pleasure to invite my friend and fellow Clevelander, Rear Admiral Julius Caesar, to read the original citation, the same words that were read on the deck of the USS Enterprise right here in Pearl Harbor, when Admiral Chester Nimitz pinned that Navy Cross on Doris Miller.
Navy Cross Medal to Mess Attendant, 2nd Class Doris Miller, United States Navy, for services as set forth in the following: for distinguished devotion to duty, extraordinary courage, and disregard for his own personal safety during the attack of the fleet in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, territory of Hawaii, by Japanese forces on December 7, 1941. While at the side of his captain on the bridge, Miller, despite enemy strafing and bombing and in the face of serious fire, assisted in moving his captain, who had been mortally wounded, to a place of greater safety, and later manned and operated a machine gun directed at enemy Japanese attacking aircraft until ordered to leave the bridge. Thank you, sir.
But that story, it did not end here in Pearl Harbor. Dory Miller's example, his leadership, and his courage under fire went on to inspire millions and increase pressure on the Navy to expand opportunities for African Americans to serve in every capacity. In the words of historian Thomas Cutrer and Michael Parrish, quote, Doris Miller's heroic actions at Pearl Harbor and his quiet but persuasive voice as an advocate for positive change constituted a vital contribution toward the full and equal acceptance of black men and women in the U.S. Navy and the nation that it serves, unquote. Dory Miller's story also had profound and lasting impact beyond the Navy. Newspapers around the country cited his story as an argument for broader civil rights and equality. The great civil rights leader A. Philip Randolph cited Miller as he successfully pressured President Roosevelt to end discrimination in the defense industry. Randolph also used Miller's story as inspiration for a planned march on Washington, D.C., a march that would finally come to fruition so famously and so consequentially in August of 1963. So in a very real sense, those who witnessed Dr. King unabashedly state, "I have a dream," they all have Dory Miller to thank and to honor and to respect for his contributions for making that day 20 years later possible, and for bringing our nation closer to coming to grips with our own history, a history not defined by perfection, but rather by the pursuit of it. In 1942, Dory Miller was ordered home for a war bonds tour, and he was asked to address the graduating class at Camp Robert Smalls, where they were finally receiving some advanced training. And his message to them was very simple, and it was very apolitical. And he demonstrated that he understood what service in the United States Navy means. To these sailors, he said, "Take advantage of every opportunity while in training, and I'm sure you'll accomplish something later on for which you will all be proud for the rest of your lives." He was speaking to African American sailors, but he's really talking about what it means to serve, about being prepared, about being courageous, and about being proud to be a sailor in the United States Navy. Shortly after the speech, he returned to sea, and he never came home. On November 24th, 1943, a torpedo from a Japanese submarine struck the escort carrier Hickam Bay amidships, where Dory Miller then served as a ship's cook, third class petty officer. The torpedo penetrated the ship's light armor and detonated the aircraft bomb magazine, igniting that entire section of the ship and killing most of the crew who were working there instantly. 23 minutes later, the entire ship went down. Of that ship's crew of over 900, only 272 survived. Ship's cook, third class, Doris Miller, was not among them. He died as he lived, an American sailor defending our nation, shoulder to shoulder with his shipmates to the end. Dory Miller stood for everything that is good about our nation. His story deserves to be remembered and repeated wherever our people continue to stand the watch today. He is not just the story of one sailor. It is the story of our Navy, of our nation, and our ongoing struggle to form, in the words of our Constitution, a more perfect union. That is why it's my honor today to announce formally that our next forward aircraft carrier, CVN 81, will be named the USS Doris Miller. This will be the second ship named after Doris Miller, sailing in the wake of a Knox-class frigate, USS Miller, which served throughout the Cold War. At its 1973 commissioning, Congressman Barbara Jordan predicted, quote, "The Doris Millers of the future will be captains as well as cooks." She was right, but perhaps even Representative Jordan's prediction was not quite ambitious enough. Today, that list of Dory Miller's successors include admirals and generals as well, with African American men and women serving at every rank and every specialty throughout our Navy and Marine Corps team. Many more African American men and women will doubtless be among the officers and crew when the USS Dory Miller takes to sea. She will be the first aircraft carrier we've ever named for an African American naval hero. But what I want to note, that it will also be the first one we've ever named for an enlisted sailor. In selecting his name, we honor the contributions of all of our enlisted ranks, past and present, men and women of every race, religion, and background who form a ship's crew or a Marine Corps unit. Today, we remember the countless bosun's mates, gunner's mates, radio and radar operators, yeomen, messmen, infantrymen, from the newest recruits to the most experienced chiefs and sergeants. With this naming, we honor all of our enlisted personnel and all who served in that capacity throughout the history of our Navy and Marine Corps. They are the backbone of our naval force, the steel spine of our ships, and perhaps most importantly, they are the faces of our great and diverse country, and they take that face to every corner of the world where they steam and where they serve. Finally, with this naming, we dedicate CVN 81 to all those who served and sacrificed in World War II. And as we all know, with each passing day, another one leaves us and proceeds to heaven. Despite the infamy that we associate with Pearl Harbor, the words of Lincoln at Gettysburg could just as easily be applied to these sacred waters behind me. He said, "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here." Likewise, we can never forget what they did here at Pearl Harbor and in the 4 years of brutal war that followed. The fate of humanity was in the hands of young sailors, Marines, soldiers, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen. And they answered the call. And they answered that call without hesitation. When asked about his actions on the West Virginia, Dory Miller told the Dallas Morning News, quote, "There wasn't much time to think. It just seemed like the thing to do." And isn't that what we expect from every sailor? Dory Miller knew what was necessary, and he did it, just like thousands of brave young Americans would do on that day, and millions would do in the long years that followed. And because Dory Miller's generation, quote, "knew what to do and sacrificed to do it," we have the freedoms that we enjoy today. We must honor them all, because every day we enjoy the freedom they bequeathed to us is a tribute to their legacy. Last year, my wife Robin and I joined one of these veterans, 96-year-old veteran of World War II. He's named Emery Crowder, and he joined us for a performance of the Messiah at the Naval Academy. Never been to the Naval Academy before. Never been to the Naval Academy Chapel before. Like Dory Miller, Emery Crowder served in the Pacific Theater, earning a Silver Star as a corpsman, serving with the Marine Corps. And who knows, Emery and Dory may have crossed paths somewhere west of here in the vastness of this great Pacific Ocean between 1941 and 43. Only they'll know. Emery stormed the beaches at Saipan and Tinian and saved lives under fire with what equipment he could. On his way to Okinawa, his ship was sunk by a kamikaze pilot, and he was rescued from the cold Pacific Ocean a few hours later. And of all the things he told me about his war experience, I'll never forget how after that performance of the Messiah, when he was surrounded by midshipmen who took pictures with him and thanked him for his service, I'll remember what he said. He said, "Thank you. I did it so that you could have this life." I've never heard such a cogent and poignant explanation of service in my entire life. These veterans did what they did so that we could have this life, not them. All of us who enjoy this life today owe a debt to all the Emery Crowders, all the Dory Millers, all who served in the Pacific, the Atlantic, and around the world in World War II. It is each of them, regardless of race, creed, or color, whom we celebrate as we name this ship today. The USS Doris Miller will be our most advanced and lethal warship. More than that, it will be the most advanced and lethal ship the world has ever seen. but beyond her capabilities as a warfighting platform, wherever this ship and her strike group may travel, the USS Doris Miller will also be a reminder of the ongoing journey for justice that has defined our nation, a tribute to our enlisted personnel, and a living, tangible memorial to all those who fought in World War II. Every sailor and Marine who sails on board the USS Doris Miller must honor its namesake's legacy by showing the same initiative, professionalism, and commitment that Messman Miller did under the harshest possible conditions imaginable. And then every one of us here today must honor the dignity and leadership Doris Miller showed as he spoke across the country, igniting a moral fight for justice and catalyzing change that would eventually transform our country and transform it for the better. Wherever and whenever the people of the world will see the USS Doris Miller, they will know what we value, what we stand for, and who we are as a people. And they will remember the extraordinary journey that brought us here, how we have never relented in pursuing justice at home and abroad, and the ongoing work and peace that we must pursue as long as we remain a nation. Doris Miller was the son of a sharecropper, a descendant of slaves. He was not given the same opportunities that men of a different color were given to serve his country. But on December 7th, 1941, just behind me, he would not be defined by the prejudice of other peoples. He was not just a sailor, he was an American sailor, so designated by the uniform that he wore, the same uniform all American sailors wear and still wear, regardless of race, ethnic background, accent, religion, or political persuasion. He was the greatest of sailors because he was an American sailor. And as an American sailor, in the violence and chaos of that awful December's day, it was his character, not his skin color or his uniform, that ordained that he would become something even more than that he would become an American hero. And it is for that reason that Doris Miller will sail into history from this point in place forward, adorning the most powerful American warship in the world for the better part of this century. It is an honor that he, his family, and all those who struggle for civil rights within our Navy and our nation duly deserve. And it is an honor I am extremely privileged to have the opportunity and authority to bestow. Yesterday, I was speaking with Doris Miller's niece, Brenda, who's here with us today. Hey, Brenda. That's Brenda on the end. She told me with great conviction and gratitude that finally, because of what we are doing here today, her uncle Doris, the quiet sailor, was awake. Did you see the rainbow this morning? He is awake. He's awake. I have no doubt that this is true and that he is watching all of us. He's awake, Brenda, and he is seizing this moment to gaze upon the proud faces of his family who are here with you at this sacred place. As I have learned more about Doris Miller, however, I'm pretty certain he is wasting no time listening to the words we speak about him. Rather, he is using this moment to awaken as many other souls as he can. Souls of dedicated American sailors and Marines with whom he served and sacrificed, so that he can share this honor with them in a place where there's no race and no rank and no branch of service, although I'm pretty sure the Army's in a different part. Because that is what American heroes do and always will do. Thank you so much for being here to participate in this moment. May God protect all those who sail on the USS Doris Miller And may God continue to bless this nation and all of the sailors and Marines who go in harm's way every day to keep us safe and to keep us free. Go Navy, go Doris Miller, go Pearl Harbor, mahalo, and as always, beat Army. Thank you.
Beat Army. Now the ushers will lead the entire Miller family on stage for a special unveiling of the future United States ship, Doris Miller. On behalf of the Secretary of the Navy, it is our great honor today to invite Ms. Henrietta Bledsoe Miller to make closing comments.
It's kind of hard to go. As I was saying, it's kind of hard to go beyond all this. The Miller family are honored to be here to represent the Miller family at this historical event. Y'all have to excuse me because I'm breathless at this moment. I often say we have these why not me moments. When Uncle Doris decided that he was going to step up to the machine gun and shoot, it was his why not me moments. And as we go through this life, we're all going to be confronted with why not me moments. Whether they be small or whether they affect, but each one you will be affecting someone if you take an action upon that moment. At the time that he did this, he did not realize how proud he was going to make this family, not that we weren't already. My grandmother often talked about him along with my uncles and my dad. But we also had my sister, who's now deceased, that kept this alive. She made sure that his memories would be memorable. What I'm asking you all to do today is have those why not me moments. I mean, it sort of supersedes race, it supersedes gender, and all of the other categories that go along with that. I just want to say thank you for allowing us to be here today to share this memorial, historical memory with you guys. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the benediction and the departure of the official party.
Lord, as we name the ship, we pray for this ship. And we ask you to bless her and keep her, to make her face to shine upon her, to be gracious to her. Lord, that you would lift up your countenance upon the crew of this ship and grant them your peace. And it's your most holy name that we pray. Amen.
Bosun, post the side boys. Escorts will now escort the official party off the stage. Pacific Fleet departing. Navy departing. Ladies and gentlemen, our official party will, will now depart along with their families.